So welcome everyone to this Leave for Change information session. It's nice to have you here, and for those of you that will be watching this session at some point in the future on demand, welcome as well. So I'm Evelina Rogue. I'm the Senior Consultant in Learning and Development in HR, and I'm the coordinator for the Leave for Change program for the University of Guelph. And I've hosted several of these panels, and I've had a chance to chat with many Leave for Change folks that have been on this program, and I have yet to not be inspired by the twinkle they get in their eyes when they talk about this wonderful program that they've been on. So hope that you enjoy this program today. Before I introduce our panel, I want to give you just a high-level overview of the Leave for Change program. So Leave for Change is actually a Uniterra program. So it's a partnership or a joint initiative between the World University Service of Canada and the Centre for International Studies and Cooperation. These are two leading international development organizations. And just to give you a high-level overview of what these organizations do, WUSC's mission is to foster human development and global understanding through education and training. And in Canada, WUSC has a number of different programs, and the U of G is a very active champion and supporter of Leave for Change, as well as other programs like the Student Refugee Program and Students Without Borders. And CC, like WUSC, is another international development organization that's been around for over 50 years. And it's really in the business of fighting poverty, strengthening the developing capacity of disadvantaged communities, supporting initiatives for peace, human rights and equity, immobilizing resources, and promoting exchanges of know-how. It's also heavily involved in humanitarian assistance. So Uniterra is this incredible program that these two organizations co-created. It sends about 6,000 volunteers a year to developing countries. 80% of them are Canadian, and most of the volunteer positions are short-term. So Leave for Change is actually a unique program in that it focuses on employees that are supported by their employers to go on short-term volunteer assignments, typically 3 to 4 weeks, to these developing countries. So for those of you that have always wanted to give back on a more global scale and are ready to step out of your comfort zone and experience a wonderful personal and professional development opportunity, this is a wonderful taste of that kind of experience. So Leave for Change really exemplifies what the university is all about, and that is improving life on both a local and a global scale. And it also dovetails nicely with our strategic framework. So I wanted to share with you just a little bit about our partnership with Uniterra. So employees typically transform 3 to 4 weeks of their annual vacation time into a volunteer assignment in a developing country. And the University of Guelph and Uniterra cover all of the costs for this program. And Uniterra coordinates, provides training, manages well-being, as well as the security of the volunteers when they're on this program. So a little bit about our change history with Uniterra. So University of Guelph was actually the first partner in 2007 to get on board with this program. We've now sent 70 staff and faculty from across the entire university to volunteer in developing countries through Leave for Change, which represents about 11% of all Leave for Change volunteers. And University of Guelph has the highest number of volunteers, and employees have gone to 10 different countries on the program so far. So they've gone to countries like Ghana, Peru, Burkina Faso, Bolivia, Botswana, Nepal, Vietnam, Malawi, Tanzania, and Guatemala. So 10 countries so far. And many of the volunteers remain connected to their host organizations even when they come back. So Leave for Change is a corporate volunteer program where employees share their talents, skills, experiences, whether work-related or non-work-related, with those in developing countries. So at its core, Leave for Change is really about capacity building, which means that volunteers go on these programs and train others in their field of expertise. So they're not in that sense acting as employees, but really as advisors that transfer their skills to the local staff to build the host organization's capacity expertise in some kind of in a particular area. So Uniterra is looking for skills and expertise in a broad range of areas. So everything from IT, communications, HR, financial management, vocational training, entrepreneurship, agriculture, and ecotourism. And one of the sort of myths that I want to dispel, because I often hear people say, well, I'm not sure if I have anything to offer. I have yet to meet someone that doesn't have something to offer. So, when it comes to these kind of short-term volunteer programs, you don't have to be, an IT geek to be able to support an organization that might need an inventory management system, to be set up in the organization. And you don't have to be a marketing guru to be able to help an organization to, create bulletins and brochures to help them market what it is that they're doing. So I encourage you to think sort of big picture in terms of what you have to offer. If you're an administrative assistant, for example, and part of your role is budgeting, guess what? That's a skill that Uniterra could use. I recall one volunteer that mentioned during her interview that she did a lot of volunteer work with violence against women in Guelph with women's shelters. And the Leaf for Change representative that was there interviewing her, her ears really perked up. And she said, I work with an organization right now in Botswana, and they need to set up a women's against rape shelter. And they're looking for someone exactly like you. So I encourage you, even when you go onto the Leaf for Change site, you don't necessarily see an opportunity that's exactly in line with what kind of skills you have right now, to apply anyway and share what skills, knowledge, expertise you have and what you'd love to be able to share. So there's a number of different areas of focus that Leaf for Change tends to focus on, and so that is things like HIV and AIDS prevention, education and care, maternal child health, food security, rural development, basic education, vocational training, empowering youth, and especially promoting equality between men and women. So many of the diverse talents and skills and experiences that we have here at the University of Guelph are absolutely perfect for this program. So I'm delighted to introduce to you our Leaf for Change panel today, and grateful to Frank Ritter from OpenEd for videotaping this for us so others can also see this in the future. So we have Linda Watt to my right, who is our Director of HR Learning and Development and Consulting Services. And then we have Justin Liu, who is the Laboratory Assistant in Agriculture and Food Laboratory and Lab Services. We have Christy Cooper, who is also in HR as our Manager of Agricultural and Veterinary Safety, and Mario Duchamp, who is our Special Constable in the Campus Community Police, Fire Safety and Emergency Services Department. So I'm going to hand it over to them to share each of their Leaf for Change stories. And they're going to share with you the impact that they were able to have in that short period of time that they went to Leaf for Change. And they'll probably focus a lot more also on the kind of impact that Leaf for Change had on them. So we're going to start with Linda Watt, who I shared with you as our Director of Learning and Development. And she's going to tell you all about her experience of being in Malawi back in 2010, where she worked with the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology as a Program Development Advisor. Over to you, Linda.
Yes, I went to Lilongwe, Malawi, and I have to say it was an incredible honor to have gone there and to meet with so many phenomenal people. Malawi is a landlocked country in Africa, population of about 18 million. And at the time that I went to Malawi, it was quite known and advertised quite a bit in the papers that it was probably the country with the highest rate of HIV and AIDS in the world at the time. And when I first read the mandate with the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, what they were looking for was somebody who could focus on helping them with an implementation plan for a strategic plan that they had developed. And so the ministry itself was looking at a multi-year project of helping increase education, access to education for girls, orphans, and other vulnerable populations in the country. And this particular project hived off one piece of it and was really focused on HIV/AIDS prevention and nutrition and how to go about doing that, building those capacities in the school teachers so that they could have an impact on the education system. So I looked at it and thought, I've done a lot of strategic planning in my life, in the roles that I've had, and certainly have had a lot of experience of implementing a lot of strategic plans. So I thought that might be something that I could do. And I had long had a desire to visit Africa, some countries in Africa that I hadn't been to. So my mandate was to work with the deputy director of this particular department, and there'll be more about that deputy director a little bit later, and the role he played, or more specifically didn't play, in the mandate itself. What motivated me to go on Leave for Change, I had a dream of working in international development since I was quite young, and had that opportunity in my 20s, came my way, and I got sidetracked by something shinier and ended up going down a different career path. And so I've often looked back to say, where would I be now had I gone that direction? And so I always continue to have that desire to go overseas and contribute something. I certainly liked that over the years there was more and more focus on capacity building, and said I like actually that approach even better than when I was initially thinking about going overseas. And I thought that that was something that I definitely could be able to do, and was looking again to challenge myself. And when I heard about Leave for Change at the University of Guelph, said this is an opportunity to fulfill my desire to do some international development, and actually challenge myself again and see what I'm able to, what kind of situations I can get into, and what kind of resourcefulness and resilience I can draw on to navigate the experience. And so Lilongwe was the perfect place to do that. What did I take away from that experience? As Evelina said at the beginning, the takeaway list is longer than my what did I leave there. For 3 weeks, it's very difficult to do everything you could possibly want to do in a role that you get. And so I can honestly say that every day there was a challenge that I myself could navigate and learn from. And so my list of takeaways quite big. A deep respect for the people that they call the warm heart of Africa, and the joyful presence that many people in that country have, despite the hardships many of them have to navigate on a day-to-day basis. The smiles and the joys and the willingness to help on a daily basis was absolutely amazing to me. I took away a better understanding of the political landscape that is in international development, how so many issues like lack of education are directly tied into economic and political realities, and actually around our belief systems and people's belief systems in the country. I took away an exposure to a fascinating world, and the powerful impact of micro business and how that can really help, especially rural populations. And I wasn't involved in that specifically, but I met a lot of people who were, and I felt that what I learned was just how powerful it can be. So people who had small businesses who could come there and teach farmers how to augment their monies and their profits from their land was phenomenal. I took away deeper commitment to listening and understanding things that were way outside my own personal belief system. And so there was some real mystical forces that people believed in Malawi, like witchcraft and magic, and even the most educated of people. And so I often had to really listen and seek to understand things that I just could not understand at first glance. I got a renewed belief in my ability to navigate challenging environments. There were a number of challenging environments that I was in, not the least of which was the physical environment where I was living. Flying ants, cockroaches all over the bedroom, some pretty wicked weather. It was an office that I was working in that had no computer, no space for me to sit down, a manager that was never there that I was supposed to work with. So there were many things that were thrown my way, and yet every day I managed to find something that I would be able to do, or a person that I would be able to interact with, or a tool that I could find useful to actually make something happen. I took away greater patience. So every day my patience was tested, and so I really came back with the patients. In fact, one gentleman that I met there said, "Do you know those programs that you come over to Africa for? They're here to teach you Americans how to be patient." And I couldn't disagree with him, because that's certainly how I felt. What did I leave behind? Some tools and resources to support implementation planning that I think could have a direct impact. A draft implementation plan that the team could put into action right away. An implementation plan mentor that spent a lot of time with me to learn the ropes and felt quite comfortable he could help his colleagues. A team with some ideas how to work more effectively as a self-managed group because they have an absentee manager who rarely showed up to work. I left behind a library that I'm very proud of. For the year after my mandate ended, I raised almost $30,000 for a library to be built at a school that I visited while I was there. A young woman at a school in Kasungu gave a very impassioned speech about how building their capacity to have more nutrition in the schools and do HIV/AIDS prevention was amazing, but how could they as young people ever help the future of their own country if there was no education or books to support their education? That young woman tore at my heartstrings so strongly that when I came back to Canada, I actually went about fundraising, found $30 and then $30,000 and subcontracted the project to a company in the UK called Building Malawi, who was able to work with Library Services of Malawi and build that library for that school. One piece of advice I would give you if you're considering Leave for Change, I actually have two pieces, and I had a hard time choosing which one. So I'll give you this one, and that is over-plan before you go, and then plan to throw the plan over. Because everything you prepare for is going to make you feel confident, and then you're going to get there and find out what you think you're there for is not exactly what you're going to be there for. And the value you think you're bringing is probably going to be very different than the value you leave behind. I strongly encourage you to consider this program. Thanks for letting me share my story.
Thank you so much, Linda. So as we heard Linda humbly and honestly share her story about how much she brought back, we can all see the wonderful work that she did as well. And you can just see in a matter of 3 to 4 weeks what a powerful experience this can be. So thank you for sharing your story, Linda. I think we have time for maybe one question before we move on. Does anyone have a question for Linda about her particular experience? Yes.
What's the second piece of advice?
So the second piece of advice, Linda.
The other thing is whatever fears that you have, I'd say feel the fear and do it anyway.
Wonderful. There's actually a book by that title, if you guys are interested, by Susan Jeffers, and it's very helpful in conquering any kind of fear or hesitation you might have around a program like this. Yeah, thank you, Linda. So next, we're going to move to Justin Liu, who is our laboratory assistant of Agriculture and Food Laboratory at the University of Guelph, and he's going to share with you his experience just last year.
Just last year. I think I am the most recent one.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Elena, for inviting me to the panel, and thank you all for coming out. I went to Malawi as well, and I also stayed in Lilongwe. My mandate was from the end of October to the end of November, so I was there for 1 month. While I was there, my local partner was the Malawi Milk Producers Association, and they introduced me to the Lilongwe Dairy, who is the largest processor in Malawi of milk. And in a country where there's not a lot of governmental oversight and regulations, it's really up to the industry players to play a key role in transforming the industry. And while I was there, I was able to help them with that. So the quality of milk in Malawi is quite poor due to various lacks in veterinary extension services and hygiene practices. The bacterial count is really, really high. To give you an idea, the bacterial count for here in Canada would be around 50,000 colony forming units per mill. And in Malawi, I was doing testing on milk that was in the several millions. So that's an order of magnitude higher. And the processors, in order to meet certain export regulations, they wanted to lower that and take advantage of the relatively cheap production costs in Malawi. So I mainly worked with their lab staff to come up with robust testing procedures for testing the microbiological quality of milk. I was able to update some of their procedures, and I was able to provide some method verification for the procedures that were in place. The whole idea is to build up trust in the system that the incentive premiums being paid out is being paid out fairly and in a consistent manner. The problem with the Malawian dairy industry is that the milk prices are really low, and because of the milk prices are really low, the farmers are reluctant to invest in their milk, in their cattle, and in their feedstock. So what I'm hoping going forward is that the trust in the laboratories services and the premium system will improve the quality of milk and resulting in a higher price, and then that way will lead the farmers to invest more in their cattle. I gave another presentation here at the university, and that focused a lot more on the technical aspects. But I think I wanted to share more my personal experiences and what life was like in Malawi. I had a little bit of trepidation going in. I didn't know quite what to expect. It was going to be a whole new experience. I haven't traveled in a very long time, and while I got there, I found that the people at the WISC office were extremely helpful. They met all my needs. They, a lot of the times, were volunteers who were there for multiple years, so they knew the city well, and they were able to pass on pieces of advice about where to go for food, where there's lower risk of food poisoning, how to get around the city. And they really took me in as part of the community of at the WISC office. They got me integrated with the expat community. I played volleyball. I went out for social occasions. So that was really nice. So if you have any sort of hesitations about what am I going to run into, it's like, how am I going to be spending my time? Am I going to be safe? The people at the WISC office are very dedicated to their job, and they did a very good job providing for looking after you, basically. I think something that I took away from my experience in Malawi was really just the daily rhythm of life. I think it's something that you don't really get if you're traveling to a place as a tourist, just seeing the sights. I was there for a month. I walked to my office every day. I ate lunch with my coworkers. I met people on the street. Because I didn't have a vehicle, I basically walked everywhere, and people would just come up to me during their walking to work and ask how my day was, and I would learn a little bit about just a stranger that I'm spending 5 minutes with walking down the street. And also, it really, like Linda was saying, about teaching Americans or Canadians about slowing down. I definitely got that and took that away as well. While I was there, the electricity, we had maybe about 3 or 4 days electricity a week. So if you've been doing field work all day and your laptop is not charged up, there's really not much you can do. And given how spotty the internet was as well, you really basically, okay, these are your constraints. You can want to be as productive as you want, but that might not happen. So it really forced me to work within the constraints and turn off that little nagging voice about, am I getting enough done? And it also just really allowed me to explore the city. I went to the market. I walked around. I made friends at the market, people who, while they were making their crafts in the market, I would sit with them and chat with them. So I really, that will be a memory that I'll carry with me for a long time. And if I have to give a piece of advice to people who are potentially thinking about applying, it's that go ahead and do it, because even if you think you don't have a lot to offer, I can guarantee you do. Of all the work that I've done with the Malawi Milk Producers Association, along with dairy, with the incentive program, I think the thing that I got accomplished, or that I thought was the biggest accomplishment, was I fixed some basic safety issues at Lilongwe Dairy. Things that, you know, we live in such a safety culture that we don't really think twice about, or like, you know, what is safe and what is not safe. They had 6 barrels of 200 liter ethanol sitting on the factory floor, and the way that they were dispensing it was basically they tipped the whole barrel over to pour it out into a container. It was basically, if there was a spark, the whole floor would have went up. And also the exposure to volatile organic solvents is probably not the best for everyone's health. So I was able to talk to the manager, get the drums located to a cage that's off of the main factory floor. So just do some risk mitigation for that. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I think we take for granted that we know here, but they would, wherever you end up, may also require. Mm-hmm. And going off of yours for picking pieces of advice, I think I'm going to stick mine in there anyways. I think is to go into your experience without too many preconceived notions. Be flexible, be adaptable. Like what Linda said, you may go in with a plan, but that plan may get chucked out the window. So I would highly recommend anyone who's thinking about it to go ahead. It's really a wonderful experience.
Thanks so much, Justin. Does anyone have any questions for Justin about his experience? You have time to take up a question right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Justin. So next we have Christy Cooper, who is our Manager of Agricultural and Veterinary Safety in HR. And Christy went to the Central Dairy Cooperative Association in Nepal in 2014. And she was a proposal writer, trainer, and advisor. And she's going to share with us her story.
Yes, hi. So similar to Evelina's initial description, when I applied, because of my background, I've been involved with volunteers a lot. I've been involved with co-op placement students. When I applied to the program, I was thinking those were skill sets that I could offer somewhere. And as soon as you submit a resume, as soon as I submitted a resume that had anything about agriculture, I'm also a vet technician, then automatically the interviewers were saying, aha, we have the thing for you. So I ended up in Nepal, which is a fantastic country, just north of India, just tucked in by Bhutan and Tibet. And it turned out when I arrived, on one hand, I was the 21st Canadian there. There were 21 of us throughout the country volunteering, all through Sessi House and through the experience in various groupings and various levels. It also turned out that flexibility Justin just mentioned totally came to the forefront. I'd been offered 2 different positions. What would you rather do? Marketing? Would you rather be involved in proposal writing? And I leaned towards proposal writing, helping them organize, helping them find funding for the dairy industry. But my initial placement was for 3 different cooperatives. So I was to be shared between Lalitpur and Makwampur and Rapendahai. And when I arrived, it was totally changed. So it turned out that I was the very first volunteer to be at the national body. So that's CDCAN, as they call it, the National Cooperative grouping for Nepal, the association, and they had all new leadership themselves. One of the leaders, key leaders, had just come, the chairperson had just come from a very wealthy area, which was Makwampur, which was down towards the lower lands, where travel is easy, where they have very big herds of cattle. So their vision was totally different, was how to bring agriculture forward in the dairy industry. And it was very much focusing on, if every farmer has a cow, because you need milk, if they had 3 to 5, they could sell this milk. How can we make this happen? So this was micro enterprise at its finest, and also then trying to change across a nation. So I found myself in very uncharted territory in that it was brand new. They weren't really sure what they wanted, but they felt very strongly that from the wealthy groups, they had all kinds of computer mechanisms, and if they could have those kinds of mechanisms at all the distant locations throughout the mountains where there's very few passable roads, where dairy milk is stored at the ambient temperature overnight and collected once a day, then they could miraculously improve the dairy industry. As I said, I was very fortunate not only to meet a whole pile of Canadians who were already there, but to follow in the footsteps of several of our own people who'd been stationed at Lalitpur, who'd been already working, and there were people there from Montreal and from other areas who were all focusing on the dairy industry, who were bringing forward concerns about the hygiene practices and how to make improvements, who were developing training materials. So I think from my standpoint, it was a little confusing at first, a little bit not intimidating, because it was very comfortable with the change and the flexibility. That was okay, but trying to get to the source of what the chairman and the vice chairman really wanted, because it was changing. As well, in the entire CESI volunteer program is the real strong mandate to include women and to empower women and to promote women. And in all of the boards that I would meet, they might have 1 or 2 women, but they were very shy to be engaged and to speak up. And within our own main department at the national body, it was much more so what we would consider the admin staff who would then attend. So there was a little bit of that dissonance with what I thought they wanted and what they were living themselves. But we also have to remember that we're helping them in micro steps, I think is part of it as well. So it was very encouraging to have their support and to get around and to visit at various areas. So this is actually at Bakdevi. So this is a small collection center where the milk truck then becomes the local bus. So everyone hops on the bus and rides it into town. It's about an hour and a half on really, really crazy roads that I didn't think our little car would make it up. But it's just such a different mentality and approach of community, all working together and developing. So from my mandate, like Justin mentioned, we had what was called load shedding. At that time of year, a lot of Nepal's power is hydroelectric, and I was there in the dry season. So without monsoon, there's very little power. The government sells some power down to India because they're looking for the bigger purpose, which meant that every area is on a rotation for your power. And you have a schedule for your sector. It changes per season, and you know when you will have power and when you won't. And as you mentioned, Justin, you better have your laptop charged. Or you just switch over to a notebook and paper because there's things to do. So there was always something to do. Sometimes I worked in the main office. Sometimes I worked at CESI House, which is their main offices, because my travel was about an hour by car across Kathmandu. And so I stayed in Kathmandu the entire month that I was there. So a lot of flexibility, I think, preparing, as Linda said, prepare, but you may arrive and you may have a totally different mandate, and that's okay. You can do this. And it's just figuring out what they're looking for and working with them to help and see. So in the end, what I was able to leave behind were a number of tools, because fortunately several of us were either backed onto our time visits or could share our information. So I was able to go where others had gone before and take along memory sticks and build and compile and share to the central national body some of what volunteers had done in small pockets of areas or in the more wealthy areas. So that was really gratifying to help them move forward. And I think I presented them with a rather thought-provoking presentation on where they could go and maybe needed to spend a bit more time before jumping right into computers and electronics when they needed some of the, the bare essentials in some of the distance locations. So that was a real about change, I think, throughout the mandate. What I took home from Nepal was an amazing sense of peace. It is crazy traffic. The horns are honking all the time. There are cows and dogs and motorcycles, and no one follows the rules of the road. I think I saw 2 working stoplights in all of Kathmandu, which is a massive spread out city. And there would be police directing traffic and police on horses and gendarmes with big rifles at some of the consulates. And yet throughout the streets, there's this feeling of peaceful tolerance of each other. There's temples on every corner. There's people that are stopping to pray, that are offering flowers and fruits. They're side by each, the Hindu temples, the Buddhist temples. I saw Islam, I saw Christianity. There's just this, togetherness. And that was, I think, very surprising to me. And so in the midst of all this noise and hubbub, and there's just this sense of beauty. One of the questions, what did I think I needed to know before I went? And I think I was fairly well prepared. You have the weekend away that helps you prepare and think of cultural differences and how we might be perceived, and not to go with those preconceived notions. That really gets you thinking about, where am I going, time of year, what are their cultural beliefs? I knew very well there was not going to be any heating, take 2 hot water bottles. That was a very important thing for the winter, which then I could pass on. So I felt fairly well prepared and did some extra preparation, even though much of it went out the window. So I think the advice is to just apply, and at the interview, something may just present itself that may be slightly different from what you thought you could do and what you have, but we have so much to offer. We have so much more, and they are looking for baby steps from various volunteers. So I think I'm finished.
Thank you so much, Christy. Wonderful.
No problem.
Any questions for Christy at this point? Yes.
And maybe it's for all of you, but how do you face the language barriers that are no doubt?
You're typically either I had an interpreter, or often within the offices they might assign you your partner there that has some of the language. Now that was my experience. So Ceci assigned someone, especially who went on tours with us, that could then do translation. So that was really great. They had a number of resources. And the other thing too was, so I met probably, I would say, 10 University of Waterloo students who were there on international development. They were there for a full school year. They had language lessons. They also went out with us and took us out and spent time with us. There were some avid volunteers, which is the Australian volunteers, that again, they were there for 2 years and had more language and time for language skills, because 4 weeks is just a blink of an eye. So you get a little bit of the very basics, but yeah, I think there is some translation, and you go in with some, and then you do a lot of computer looking things up too.
And in some case, they also have an interpreter with you, right? Which also slows everything down, because it takes twice as long to communicate. Yeah. Linda, you
I
want
was
to
going to
say
say the official language
Yes,
of
luckily.
Malawi is English. It's the official language, but their national language is Chichewa. So most people that I encountered spoke some English, or good English, and there was, maybe 30% that I ran into that were speaking predominantly Chichewa, and there would be somebody there who could help me interpret.
As I understand it, I think they're taught Chichewa from birth, but then when they enter the school system, they're
It's
taught English. So it depends on the person's education level, how
Yeah.
much English they spoke, and go a long way.
Thank you. So last but not least, we have Mario Duchamp, who is our special constable and dressed up here today, not necessarily for this occasion, but he's part of convocation, so we get to see him in his uniform. And he went to Vietnam. He's actually been twice on leave for change. So Mario went in 2013, I believe, and then today you're going to focus primarily on your experience, I think, in 2015 of working at one of the colleges in Vietnam as a campus security advisor.
That's right. So,
Great.
just to go back on some of the things that you said originally is what happened with my mandate is that they actually, when you apply for a position with CC or WUSC, there's preset mandates. However, when I applied, there wasn't anything that felt like it was going to be a good mix. So they actually created a position and went to Vietnam and actually asked one of the colleges there to whether or not they'd be interested in what service I could provide, because mine was more technical. So I got into the emergency response, policing and security, also fire protection and health and safety. So I actually worked with Can Gin College in a place called Rec Ya, which is down in the southeast or southwestern part of Vietnam. So just a little bit of background on Vietnam. It's a communist country. It's approximately 1/9 the size of Ontario, but has 90 million people, which is 3 times the size of Canada. So imagine how many motorbikes are on those streets. It's pretty wild. So when I arrived, I pretty much open arms. I had my this here is basically the opening ceremony when they actually get you there. They speak with you to try and establish what your mandate will be. Exactly like everyone is saying, you go there with a pre-notion that you're going to do something, and they have a completely opposite schedule or guideline as to what they want to do. I convinced them otherwise, and I went ahead with what I wanted to do, which was exactly what, it sort of worked in line. Here, what they wanted me to do is work with the hotel and tourism industry, because in Vietnam, that is a big component of the growing trend in Vietnam, is to bring tourists to Vietnam, very similar to resorts and hotel systems. So here what they wanted me to do is actually train the security staff or the security officers within that program to be able to educate them more along the lines of fire protection, emergency response, while they actually go out to work at the different resorts. So my mandate was a little bit different than that in changing their curriculum to encompass everyone that actually was taking the program. So that would also include receptionists, people in the food industry or in their kitchens, and housekeepers. I wanted to train everybody. So it's the responsibility of not only the security staff to deal with emergency situations. However, if a person is learning the curriculum to actually go work in a resort as a receptionist at a large facility, they also need to know what emergency response and emergency services is all about. Being ready for emergency conditions. Let it be fire, tornadoes, bomb threats, anything of disaster, they also have to be ready for it. So I was actually working under the rector, which is the president of the university there, who put me through with the director of that department. So I worked on changing the whole entire curriculum to engage all the students to take part in that. So it really changed the dynamics of what their program was about. While we were in this meeting here, what the rector was also noticing is that I just had finished my master's in leadership, and the school itself, they had very similar to here. You have engineering, you have physics, and so on. They have so many different curriculums or programs that they felt that the directors were not working well together to make the school, grow and maybe expand. So they asked me if I would do a specific leadership program with them at the same time. So that added to my mandate. I had 30 days to not only create this new curriculum for the school, for the hotel tourism industry, but also do a leadership program for the school to work well together and try and see where down the road they can grow into something bigger as a university. In respect to that, I also created an emergency response plan for the whole entire university there, or college. So I work with the rector board and also the executive board to do a facility inspection of the property and to identify key areas of risk factor or emergency response areas that they required. Really worked well together, talking about the language barrier. I had a translator. I also had the director itself from that tourism department was English speaking, so everything worked really well. Also, Vietnam is French colony, so if you speak French, you can practice that quite a bit over there. Relationships. I've established so many relationships there. I had my own private, believe it or not, sorry guys, but I had my own private driver. I stayed at a resort, so it was like the tropics. It was amazing. I had my own pool and I had everything. So it's not just the bad end, but it's also, they reward you. However, they did plan on taking me out to, or they wanted to plan to go to what they call Phuc Island, which is it used to be owned by Cambodia, but Vietnam took it over. And what they started doing is building resorts on that island. If you ever want to go, amazing place. So there was another person from Ottawa that was there at the time too, and they were trying to organize whether or not they would let me go to Phuc Island. The first time I was there, in 2013, I went to Phuc Island. This rector, or president, wouldn't let me go because he didn't want something to happen to me and have to answer to Vietnam government saying, we lost a Canadian here. So eventually I sort of told him that I had already gone, and he said, yeah, we can let you go. So they're very protective of you. They want to make your stay very, very special. They work really close with you to try and establish what you want your goals. Again, internet, touch and go. Be prepared to go on the fly, and if you need to just go out there and just do your thing. Sometimes you have to do it without the computer and just go with what you know and the knowledge and the idea. I worked a lot of long nights because I really focused on getting this done. I accomplished it in the end. They were quite happy. Kudos to me. I've actually talked to them a little bit more after that to try and incorporate that into all the different curriculums. And they actually asked me to come back for a whole year. So for me, I tried to get the leave of absence just last year, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But they're still hounding me to come back for a full year. So that was good. So what I took back, what I left behind is amazing friendships. What I brought back is amazing friendships. So I actually established some great rapport there last year. It's been 2 years almost now since I've been there. Some of the great relationships that I built last year in April 17th, one of the teachers called me up and asked me to come to her wedding. So on April 19th, I was on a plane, and April 21st, I was there for her wedding. So, and then I took off on traveling throughout the whole country in Cambodia, Thailand for 2.5 months. So it was amazing, and I still get Facebook time, Messenger. I'm on the phone with them at least 2-3 times a week. So amazing program. I give it kudos if you guys really truly want to get in it and you want to take some time aside and talk about it, because we only have so much time. It's amazing. Here, this is actually don't take a look at me on the motorbike, because typically you're not supposed to be on a motorbike when you're, but this is not on leave. This was actually on my last trip when I went to the wedding. I actually took a motorbike and went out into the, up in Sapa, which is the north end on the Chinese border. And I was up about 10,000 feet up in the mountains. And these are the little villages along the way. And I just stopped the bike. And the other photo behind, or the next photo that is not on here, as you can see, there's a child on the side, and then there's a father holding a little baby. And of course, he wanted me to hold the baby, so I did. And well, he didn't have any clothes on, like on the bottom half, and I ended up wearing it. So, but again, it's all part of it. And you know what? They're just so loving, and these two trips has touched home for me. Like I almost get teary-eyed every time I talk about it. But no, it's amazing. So I really encourage you to take part. Everyone has something to bring to the table, no matter what you think about what your background is. But honestly, everyone has something in their book of business or book of history, whatever you want to call it, that you can bring to the table, and they're open arms.
Thank you,
So,
Mario.
yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have any questions for Mario about his experience? And we'll just open it up for any other questions that have popped into your mind as you were listening to their stories. Yes.
I see different levels of accomplishment. Although the time is very short, right? It's 1 month or 2 weeks, and you cannot accomplish a lot of things. I see differences, and I don't know, how do you deal with this? I mean, you definitely have great satisfaction that you managed to actually implement something. But then, you know, did you manage to implement the microbiology tests?
I think that was that was going to take a lot longer than what I was there for, and I think that's a pretty consistent theme in the program. Sometimes you are going to run into difficulties just because of circumstance. I was there with 2 other Canadian volunteers, and and while they were there, some of their partners, that the person that they were assigned to work with, kind of just disappeared. Took basically called in sick every day. So it really depends on what the circumstances are. But then you just have to roll with the punches and see what you can do. She did end up finding someone else to work with, and did put in a product show at the some kind of convention in Malawi. So that was something. She went in with something, and then she had to pivot, and she got something else that may not be necessarily what she's aimed at or viewed as a certain level of accomplishment, but she got something done, given the circumstances.
Just to go further on that too, is that I had some challenges when I was there too. So when I was actually working there, a lot of the teachers teaching English, they love foreigners, right? They want you to come to their class and teach English and things like that. That's not part of my mandate. However, I did end up trying to schedule, going to each one of the teachers' classes at least once a week. Even though they say you can't be doing that, but again, you just do it because it's part of the culture, and you're helping out and everything else. Also, it's very hot in Vietnam, very humid, and they start late and they finish at 11:30, and they go home and sleep for a couple hours, and then they come back at 2 and they finish at 4. And in that work period, they also want to go have coffee all the time, because it's too hot. There's no air conditioning in the classrooms. And so for me, it was like I was taking part in all of those extra little things during the workday, but at night I wanted to focus a little bit more and have me time to be able to get things done. But I was still able to get out with the people from the hospitality. They take you out. They want you to have at least one night throughout the whole month to go out and drink with them. And you go out, you have a good time, and you go to people's homes, and it's great. You have to partake in that too, because it's part of the culture. It's really amazing.
The building capacity concept too, I think, is one. where it's not just about the implementation of one project. If you have the good fortune to be able to do that, it feels wonderful to be able to go from beginning to end. But it's in every conversation. You know, it's in every day where you look at where there might be an opportunity to share with someone, you know, something that they could do different or something that you've learned in the past. I think about a woman that I was working beside. She was the manager's receptionist who didn't know how to use Word very well. And so I was giving her, people would laugh about this if they know my computer skills, but I was giving her some tips on that, on filing, on information management, when other people were coming and asking for documents and she didn't know how to file. And so it was like, it's all around you where these opportunities exist, which helps you to feel this sense of accomplishment as long as you're looking at it day to day.
Yeah, definitely. I was just curious, kind of, if these organizations actually kind of keep track and you know, will not let your efforts kind of go to waste, but then have another volunteer follow up and just continue your work.
And that's what I think I was really lucky, because there were Canadian volunteers continuing on. There had been some before me, and there was one working for Ceci House. So I actually gave two training sessions, one to external advisors from other groups, all kinds of other groups, and one within Ceci to their own personnel. But that's also where you get the differences between what the chair and the vice chair think they want. They want you to write the proposal. I'm not here to write the proposal. I'm here to help you to build that capacity. And of course, in finding, what I discovered was, you know, you are, you know, getting you know, millions of rupees and buying computers is not going to help them with their dairy industry. So I was able to kind of take them back a couple of steps and share with the chairman, who was new, a little bit of a snapshot through a comparative analysis of what is actually out there, because he hadn't been to all the collection centers across the nation. Not that I got to them all, of course, there's like 1,800 of them. But that helped them in building their capacity, and I think that was far more of an influence to them. And at the same time, I left them with a list of recommendations, and one of them was for sure to have a national volunteer who would get to all the collection centers, as well as an international volunteer that could carry forward the work. And I was really pleased to see actually those positions offered afterwards. So although I didn't come up with a finite project, I think it's building that capacity. It's those stepping stones that helps them help themselves within their own abilities and their own hierarchical situation and their own restrictions.
I was going to add on, WUSC had also a exit process where you do leave recommendations, and that I made a suggestion for follow-on volunteers, and I generated a report with recommendations on how to proceed forward. So whatever you do, there are linkages between you and the previous volunteer and the follow-on volunteers.
Thank you. So to wrap up, I thought I would just highlight a few of the themes that I heard across your stories, and one of them is that there is so much that University of Guelph faculty and staff have to offer at Leap for Change, and oftentimes they're looking for baby steps in these developing countries, and every volunteer that goes does have a little bit of an impact, and that continues to be built upon in terms of their capacity over time. And assume that you have something to offer, and the Leap for Change program officer will find an assignment that matches your skill set, whether they're your skill sets that you use at work or volunteer or in other aspects of your life, or they will create an opportunity for you, as in Mario's case. And the other thing that came up is trust your ability to navigate through whatever challenges you're going to face, because you're going to face them. And I think we heard in all four situations today, whatever plan you might have prepared for is going to go out the window. And trust that you will be resourceful, and you'll take the initiative, and you'll build the relationships and negotiate and adapt through that. And I think in many cases, you also realize just how much of that resourcefulness and initiative and flexibility you have through being put in those challenging kind of situations. And I want to just thank the panel because I'm extremely grateful for the preparation they did to share with all of you their experiences and taking time out of their schedules to be able to share the kind of impact that they have. So Mario wants to add one last comment, and then I'll wrap up with where you can get more
Yeah,
information.
one last quick comment. So I'm open to any discussion if anybody wants to go grab coffee or anything like that and talk about it. But I also, on my behalf, I'd like to truly thank you for actually putting this whole day on and everything, all the work that you put into this program also, because you do a great job too.
Thank you. Well, I could talk about it all day because it's a wonderful program, but I know it's always more impactful to hear from people that have been there, really experienced it. So thank you to all of you. And if you are looking for more information, if you just search Leave for Change on our University of Guelph website, you will be able to find all the folks that have gone on Leave for Change, all 70 University of Guelph employees. You'll be able to read their profiles about what they do at U of G, and you'll also be able to see pictures and read blogs of their Leave for Change experiences. Many of them have blogs there. And also, any one of them would be more than happy to hear from you if you have a question, and I'm happy to connect you, or you can just contact them directly. They're all so passionate about the work that they did, and many years later still talk about what a life-changing experience it was. So I encourage you to reach out to any of the Leave for Change alumni. You're also more than welcome to contact me anytime, so my contact information is there. Evelina Rogue in Human Resources, and Amélie Sylvain is the Senior Program Officer, and she is the coordinator for Leave for Change for all of Canada. So you're more than welcome to contact her, and she's the one that receives the applications as well. So thank you for being here, and look forward to hearing from you.
Namaste.